Read our Bible passage, and following this, Kev will come and share with us.
So today's reading is Judges 6. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. Because of the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples invaded the country. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza and did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep nor cattle nor donkeys. They came with their livestock and their tents like a swarm of locusts. It was impossible to count them or their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. When the Israelites cried out to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet who said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians, and I delivered you from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them out before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live, but you have not listened to me." The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied. "But if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hands of Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." Gideon replied, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you." And the Lord said, "I will wait until you return." Gideon went inside, prepared a young goat, and from an ephah of flour he made bread without yeast. Putting the meat in a basket and its broth in a pot, he brought them out and offered them to him under the oak. The angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened bread, place them on this rock, and pour out the broth." And Gideon did so. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread with the tip of the staff that was in his hand. Fire fled from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." But the Lord said to him, "Peace, do not be afraid, you are not going to die." So Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and called it "The Lord is Peace." To this day it stands in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. That same night the Lord said to him, "Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old. Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of this height. Using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down, offer the second bull as a burnt offering." So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord told him. But because he was afraid of his family and the townspeople, he did it at night rather than in the daytime. In the morning, when the people of the town got up, there was Baal's altar demolished, with the Asherah pole beside it cut down, and the second bull sacrificed on a newly built altar. They asked each other, "Who did this?" When they carefully investigated, they were told, "Gideon, son of Joash, did it." The people of the town demanded of Joash, "Bring out your son. He he must die, because he has broken down Baal's altar and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. But Joash replied to the hostile crowd around him, "Are you going to plead Baal's cause? Are you trying to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar." So because Gideon broke down Baal's altar, they gave him the name Jerubbaal that day, saying, "Let Baal contend with him." Now all of the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples joined forces and crossed over the Jordan and camped in the valley of Jezreel. Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, summoning the Abiezrites to follow him. He sent messengers throughout Manasseh, calling them to arms, and also into Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, so that they too went up to meet them. Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said." And that is what happened. Gideon rose early the next day. He squeezed the fleece and wrung out the dew, a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, "Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece, but this time make the fleece dry and let the ground be covered with dew." That night God did so. Only the fleece was dry. All of the ground was covered with dew. This is the word of the Lord.
Boy, oh boy. I had thought about getting some sheep, but Mel thought that was a bad idea. Looking at the rest of you, I don't think you'd be good for running around gathering them and shearing them. I don't know about you, but for me, God often throws me curved balls that I wasn't really expecting, but balls that fit his plan. So what do I mean? Well, the other Sunday, after I'd helped Barbara in the morning service with a bit of a sketch, Barbara and I were chatting in the office, and I happened to say to her that, "Do you know, Barbara, it's best to stick at what you're good at." I explained to her that, really and truthfully, I like doing the small stuff, the bits that make people laugh, but I felt my gifts don't lay in speaking or teaching, as it takes me ages to focus, doesn't it, Mel? Yeah. And others are much more logical and adept at speaking. But I love making people laugh and smile, so small stuff is great. Then in passing, as I left the office, I said, "It's best to stick at what we're good at." Then I got the message through from Dave, thank you, inviting me to do this. And I thought, okay, God, is this one of your curved balls that you're going to give me? Can we turn on to next? Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. So I prayed to God. I said, okay, if this is from yourself, I will do this and see what happens. Now, I must have to put a warning here to all and sundry. I'm not your typical speaker. And what I have to say is merely a reflection, not necessarily the thoughts of the incumbent clergy or any learned theologian. Okay, next bit, campfire. Okay, can we have the... I spent ages. Oh, it's upside down. This is another one of these things that define logic. Okay. We can turn it back to the other one if we can. Or else we could do that. I suppose we could do that, couldn't we now? This is a narrated story I've just come up with. Take from it what you want, disperse with the rest of it. It's just what may or may not have happened. Okay. The campfire's embers glowed and danced in a myriad of colours before they cooled in the night air. Flames licked deliciously those who encompassed around its borders, warming and caressing them. A welcome barrier to the biting cold air pressing in from the wilds. The reflective light flickered on their faces, revealing a group of old men, wizened, withered, gnarled, and younger, fresh faces, youth. Throwing the odd dry timber onto the now dying fire in an attempt to delay the inevitable creeping cold, sent showers of dancing fireflies into the night air. The storyteller paused, drawing his audience in close. He stared into the eyes of captivated, young, thirsty minds as he retold past experiences of Yahweh's power and provision. The excitement pulsated through the listeners, stirred hearts, and touched souls, and paradoxically, at the same time, pierced their minds with the recollection of the reality, the grinding poverty in which they found themselves in, and the abject fear. It was almost cruel. Yahweh seemed to be on vacation, out of earshot. Were they just fables, just delightful, inspiring and embellished stories? Was there really a God who cared for them? Even the fire's sparks, flying heavenward, seemed to shout despair as they flickered and died out in the suffocating cold. One by one, the assembled men bid each other a good night, vanishing into the blackness till only one soul remained. One soul searching for answers. He prodded the fire, scattering ashes, dirt and debris. Deep in thought, he picked up an olive branch that was half burnt, held it in the air till the flame extinguished and smoke curled up in a twisting gossamer thread. Then in the fading glow wrote with the charcoal on a nearby boulder the most important burning question in his young mind and soul. It was a prayer. Where are you, Yahweh? He then threw the stick into the fading fire. Disgruntled, disillusioned, and depressed, Gideon went home. Now, I don't know whether Gideon ever sat behind a fire and heard stories like that, but they would have heard stories about how great God was. So that's just a bit of my imagination. The story of Gideon is one of my favorite in the book of Judges. Even as a child, I've been drawn to these characters just like I was captivated by Robin Hood and Sir Francis Drake and Dick Turpin. However, now in adulthood, I've wondered about these leaders we find in this book, each with their own encounter with God. But this Gideon, he seemed to have had a much more intimate encounter with God, oh, so much closer, probably closer than he would have wanted. Okay, so this Gideon, what drove him to do the things he did? The sheer bottle he had to attack an army, massively well-equipped army, with a handful of men on the say-so of God. Well, that defies all logic and reason. However, that part of the story we shall leave to somebody else or for some other time. But for now, let's have a quick look at the start of his adventures into this trusting of God. As I've grown older, not necessarily wiser, I've wondered about these people in the Bible, who they were, and were they just spiritual folk? You know, like the Martin Luther Kings of this world or the Billy Grahams, so in tune with God that the glow of their lives made us mere mortals cringe in the corner? Or were they just folk open to the possibility that God may just want to use the average Joe or Josephine? Israel was in a mess. Can we have the video of... This is my grandson.
Oh no, poor Gramps. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Sorry, Gramps. Sorry. Sorry. Poor Gramps. Oh dear. Gramps, we apologise. But was it fun, Chester? It was fun.
Let me sit down.
Yeah, go for it. Was that fun?
Oh dear, every year as the seeds fall in abundance from my neighbour's expansive and productive sycamore tree, you will find me on the ground of our large stone driveway, picking up bucket loads of spinning jennies in an attempt, thank you, Chester, to stop them sprouting in the stones. That was a small bucket. That was not the real bucket, fortunately. If I did not do this, I would have a carpet of small trees in the springtime, destroy my driveway, and then even harder work would result. Some, however, despite my crawling on the ground, do manage to escape, as you can see. So what has this to do with anything to do with our hero in Israel? Well, you see, Israel had dropped the ball in its collective relationship with God. It had allowed the surrounding world to infiltrate its bond with God. It did not keep itself unpolluted by the world it found itself in, and had adopted other gods in its life, creating a new triune God. Yahweh, Baal, and Asherah. This is according to some historians. Blending and diluting the holiness of God. God walked away. Not out of sight, but he left them to the consequences of their actions. Are we like that too? We so align ourselves to the ethos of this world that we forget that we're God's children, called to be holy and separate. Life was so bad. Here we read about the mess that Israel found itself in, driven from the fertile plains and into the hills. Life had become incredibly rough, incredibly tough. Raided by the Midianites and the Amalekites, who timed their raids to perfection. Harvest time. No careful tiptoeing through the fields, skirting through the edges of the ripe crops. Oh no. They just fly in like locusts and strip the fields bare, leave nothing. So into the hills go Israel and eke out a poor existence in between the rocks. Now, it's often the experience of suffering that draws us close to God. When we find we have nothing left in our own tanks, we're drawn to God because he is the sustainer. He will give us what we need. Well, the people of Israel cry out to God in desperate, and God sends them someone to remind them of their failure to trust God and him alone, because they were hedging their bets, as it were, trying to fit in with the world. So God's messenger leaves them hanging with the news of their failure. Miserable wretches. I bet they went home downcast. No mention of a rescue plan. Just for a moment, picture the scene in a large corporate boardroom. There's a huge, long, shiny table around which sit the heads of the departments, all in shiny suits, no shorts. Called to a special and rather hastily arranged gathering. All around the room are pictures of people who've been successful in this company. In walks the head of the business, the managing director, and he tells them in no uncertain terms that they've all made a right mess of it all, and that the business is about to collapse financially. Then as the shop board look around, asking themselves questions, the managing director just gets up and walks out. No means of getting back. No means, no plans, no nothing. And that's pretty much what happens here in the first few pages of Judges 6. God sometimes leaves us with the consequences of our disobedience. But however, he never leaves us out of his sight. He's trying to draw us back to repentance, always. And that's what he was doing there. He was trying to conjure up in Israel's collective thoughts the fact that what they'd done was wrong, and was trying to get them to focus back on God. The door of restoration remains open. The effects of our sin, however, can remain on view. Next one. Gideon meets God. Hiding out of sight, covered head to foot in bits of chaff, it's in his ears, nose, coat in his throat, and his thick, wiry hair. Some people are lucky. We find our reluctant hero, Gideon, and he's threshing wheat in a wine press so that the nasty enemy can't see his cloud of chaff, can't come galloping along in to steal his meager crop. He's not a happy man. He's quite discontent, and he's muttering. Gideon wants change. He wants to see restoration, and he's been telling God that for ages too. However, he isn't ready for God's answer. He just wants a change, a miracle. You see, praying for action may well be that you're the answer God has in mind. Are you up to that possibility? Now, I'm not too sure if Gideon has the slightest inclination just who he's speaking with. But the exchange is surreal as God talks directly to Gideon. God tells him, "God is with you, O mighty warrior." Gideon, however, feels anything but a mighty warrior, and he questions God. Why has this happened to us? Where are all these miracles that have been our bedtime story for so long? Didn't God get us out of Egypt's hands? Where's God? He feels the enormity of the task, and he feels small and useless. Look at me. Take a look at me, God. I'm covered in failure. You'll see nothing good come from me. I can sometimes look at the task and think, you're out of your league, Kev. Back out of it before it all comes apart. There's bound to be someone better equipped. However, God, I think, is quite happy with the fact that we've got feeble strength, because then we're not going to be boasting about our own ego, are we? Look what he says to Gideon. This is the Message version. Go in this strength that is yours. Save Israel from Midian. Haven't I just sent you? And my paraphrase for that would be, go for it, Gideon. Put in what you've got. I can work with that. I can do what you cannot. I can do a lot with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Just watch. The final bits. It's terrifying to tread on people's toes and poke people in eyes. This is the best action bit. This is the declaration of intent. I so wish I could hear what his dad says to him after this. After this demonstration of childlike step. Well, it's not really a step, is it? It's a quantum leap into faith and obedience. As I've already said, some historians suggest that the Israelites had started to link Baal, Asherah, and Yahweh, claiming that they were related. So God tells him to destroy the obstacle that's the elephant in the room. His father's Asherah pole and the Baal altar. Using his father's prize bull, the prime one, not the best one, not the scraggy one in the corner of the field. Oh no, it's the Lamborghini Diablo. It's a status symbol. It's all full of potential, this bull. It would sire a huge herd of fit, productive cattle. Oh, and there's a real money spinner too. We must not think of giving God the scraggy bit of our lives. He wants the best. He wants our all. So Gideon, tiptoeing and all in dark clothing, blacked out faces, being oh so very quiet, a small group of men gather, waiting, watching till no one's around. Gideon then signals to his servants to carry out the well-rehearsed plan, stepping out of the shadows and into the town square. They build in the dead of night an altar to God. On it, Gideon places the chopped up pole and offers a bull as a burnt sacrifice. Then he scarpers back home, heart beating like it would explode. In the morning, he awakes. There is pandemonium. Furious Israelites baying for blood as they fear the wrath of the fertility god that will be a little bit miffed. One of Gideon's men jumps ship and spills the beans. The townsfolk come banging on Dad's front door. Bring your son out, we'll kill him for what he's done. However, strange enough, Dad is not having any of this, and he tells the mob to go home, because if it's upset a rubbishy God, let them fight, not you. So finally, in closing, let's think on these things. You may feel you're alone in your faith, fearful that no one else is a Christian where you are. But maybe they are. And maybe it will take you to standing out to encourage others to do the same. So what is this story about? It's about being holy as God is holy, keeping your lives unpolluted. The door back to God always remains open to those who want to turn their backs on sin. God can surprise us, big style. Let's not give God the scraggy bits of our lives. And God can use us in our weakness because he is all sufficient. Okay. Do you want more?